They had more tanks in town than we had people. We lasted, I think they gave us a chance at 1 o'clock to surrender. And then again that night, our lieutenant accepted it. So that was my entry into prison camp. You know, when you're standing there with your hands on top of your head and a gun in your belly, you kind of, I don't know, the adrenaline doesn't run, nothing does. You just kind of stand in the stupor, I think. Now, I don't know if you're afraid, but it's just hard to comprehend. This is happening to me, you know. If you didn't have a tin can, you didn't eat. I'd give anything if I had the tin can I had in prison camp. But it was a porcelain wash bowl, it was a latrine, it was your source of food, anything, that tin can. So I guess treasure what little you have and take care of it and hang on. Then you got some breakfast, and the breakfast was ersatz coffee. And you got a part of a tin can full if you were lucky enough to have a tin can. If you didn't have a tin can, you didn't eat. But my understanding of the coffee was that they took barley and parched it, and then they crushed it, and that made a colored liquid. And it was you know, not hot, but it was not. It was more than warm. And some of us drank it. Some of us used it to wash in. That was kind of the purpose of it. At noon we got the bread, I guess, and the bread was the famous German bread, and I do have the recipe of it. It had sawdust and leaves and straw in it. And they would give you, kind of depending upon their supply, so many loaves of bread. And like if I had 20 people I was accountable for, maybe one day I'd get 4 loaves, so that was 5 people to a loaf. I think the average was like 6 men to a loaf of bread, and the loaves were not as, they were a smaller loaf. And you would cut it and distribute it. And it was the famous black bread, but you'd kill for it. I mean, it was all you had. And I've been asked, well, who got the biggest piece? Well, what we'd do is we'd have these groups, and the day I was captain, and then the captain's position would go around the circle, and I would cut the bread today, and everybody would take a piece, and I got the last piece. So if there's a small piece, the captain got it. That was how we kept from fighting about you got the biggest piece. And then at night, you know, 4:30 or 5, of course it was winter and it got dark. It was dark all the time, it seemed like. But that's when we got our can of soup. Because normally it was either the tops of cow beets or the bottoms. There was a lot of bugs and a lot of protein in it and a lot of dirt, and you got a part of a can of that. That was your 3 meals. And I remember one time we had a can of condensed milk. And how do you divide that with 6 people or anything else, you know? So somebody said that their mother made caramel that way or something. So from the way I remember it, he poked a hole, no, maybe not poked a hole in it, but he put it in hot water and cooked it, I guess, and it did almost turn to caramel. So then they could slice it like in 6 pieces, so we all had a piece of caramel. I've been knocked down several times with the stock of a rifle across the back of your neck and your shoulder. It kind of chopped you down, and sometimes you knew why, and sometimes you had no idea why. And I said, I make it sound like it was a daily occurrence, but it happened a few times. And like road marches, we were moved. I don't know, we were on the road 3 or 4 days at a time, sometimes marching someplace. And the guards that you had if they were on for 8 hours, you know, you could have a set of good guards that would treat you humanely, and the next time you might have a set of guards that were very inhumane. And then instead of waiting on the wagon to pick you up, they'd shoot you and leave you in the ditch. You never knew what to expect. But I was interrogated there by this guy, lieutenant, and through an interpreter, and I didn't know anything. I couldn't answer, you know, when did you see some panzer, not some artillery group, or when did you see a certain armored division and stuff? I didn't know anything. And I think back now, 65 years later, I really couldn't prove to you I was ever in Germany. I don't know where I was during the war. I was where they put me, where I ended up. Whether it was in a apple orchard or in somebody's living room, I don't know. But anyway, He interrogated me. I didn't know anything except my name, rank, and serial number, and they want to know where we'd seen artillery outfits, where we'd done this, where we're doing that. And no, I couldn't tell him anything. I didn't know anything, and I wasn't supposed to anyway. Well, he didn't like the treatment so that I was giving him or the answers. So he stood me at attention outside of the door, and it was a blizzard. And it seems like it was 8 hours, but it's probably 2 hours or something. But they changed guards about every 20 minutes on me. And I remember I'd try to work my hands, to keep them from freezing. So anyway, when they finally called me in, I could hardly bend my arms. I was so cold. And all at once, he was the nicest guy in the world. He gave me a cigarette and a drink of cognac and spoke fluent English. And he had been educated at Iowa State College after the World War I, and part of our Lend-Lease and our, rebuild the world policy or philosophy. He had lived with an uncle in Davenport, and I think his uncle, if I remember correctly, was editor or owner of the newspaper. I don't know what the Davenport paper would be. And he knew more about Des Moines than I did, or Iowa. I had never been to Des Moines but 2 or 3 times in my life, probably at that point in my life. But he spoke fluent English, and I still didn't know anything, and I was dismissed. Yeah, I wrote every time they had some Red Cross card letter forms, and I wrote every time I got one. None of them ever got home, but I wrote them every time. In the time I was a prisoner, I think I shared 4 Red Cross boxes. I think you were supposed to get a box per man per week. And I think I shared 4 boxes, and we would divide them, again, like the bread. I think once like 4 people, and twice like 6 people, and the 4th time we had like 14 or 15 people on a box. And the Germans were charging us, I think there were 5 packs of cigarettes in a parcel, and I think they charged us 2 packs of cigarettes per parcel delivery fee. They brought them down from the ports up in in North Germany, which is not too far. You couldn't get medical care. They didn't. They did feed you. You're supposed to get a living diet. I never got a blanket, a toothbrush, or a comb, or anything. I never saw a piece of toilet tissue. Well, it was the British 7th Armored. The Desert Rats liberated us, and they kept us in camp for a few days. Now, how many days I can't remember, and I think they gave us rations. I know they did, but it seems like they put us on American rations, like we had some sea rations. A few days later, my aunt called from California to tell my mother and dad, like 2 o'clock in the morning or something, it was midnight out in California, that she heard that I was alive. And how she had heard it was that this lady in Chicago, who was a friend of my aunt's in California, had seen in the paper, they'd listed, and I have the article someplace, they'd listed that had the article about the liberation of this prison camp, and saw people actually die from the excitement and all that stuff. And he had a list of the different people from Chicago and Chicago area, some of them 100 names like that, but from Iowa he liked 9 or 10 names. And he had Bruce Longstreet or Long something, because I couldn't read my writing. Well, this lady saw it in Chicago and thought, well, that was close enough. She called my aunt in California. My aunt called my folks. And then everybody knew Sharon knew it, because, with a party line system and 1 operator on. So I guess they had a party all night, but they still didn't know whether it was true or not. But that was, I remember this doctor in Fort Dix on our way home talking to us, and there were 30 or 40 of us in the room, and he told us about going home, and he gave us a diet and what our mothers were supposed to do and all this and that. No fried potatoes, no crispy chicken, I don't know at all. But that if we took care of ourselves, that most of us would live till we were 30, and some of you are going to make it till you're 40. Well, I was 20. Oh, well, that's not bad. That's a long time. So ever since I was 30, these have been free years, season. I want a few more free years, but so it affects you. It affects you emotionally. I wouldn't talk about it for 45 years now. I won't shut up.